Hey, welcome to the first edition of Ask Dave. This is Dave from O'Fallon Nutrition, and as you probably know, if you're watching this, we started a new little program where we're going to ask people to submit questions to O'Fallon Nutrition, and I'm going to try to give some answers or some general thoughts on what folks ask. So our first story today, or our first episode, is going to be Tara. And Tara was asking about minor aches and pains in the morning. She said she's been using NSAID pain relievers for 15 years at the daily limit, that she's not sure how to function without them, that she doesn't know how to deal with minor aches and pains, and says what should she do if she's waking up in the morning in pain. So first thing is, I would just want to mention the disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not allowed to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent any disease, etc. So really all I can do is talk in a general sense about a situation like this. If I was thinking about a scenario like this with somebody that I knew, I would wonder whether or not they were dealing with something called the NSAID rebound effect. And this is something I would encourage you to look up online, or anybody interested in this topic. The NSAID rebound effect is basically a situation where folks who have been using NSAID pain relievers for a long time might experience more pain temporarily when they discontinue use. And it might be something that might give you a false impression that, or actually this is what I wonder, if it gives people a false impression that they might hurt more than they would over the long-term sense, but if they don't get through that transition period, they may not ever know it. So that'd be the first thing I'd bring up. Now, really importantly, there's probably 3 or 4 major considerations to think about when somebody is experiencing pain on a day-to-day basis or headaches on a day-to-day basis. So I've got some notes here to remind me. Of course, we covered the NSAID rebound effect. So one of the things to know, the second topic I want to mention regarding NSAIDs, is that they help with pain by suppressing something called COX-2. COX-2 is an inflammatory enzyme in the body. And if you suppress it, you get pain relief. All these medications, ibuprofen, aspirin, acetaminophen, naproxen sodium, those are all COX-2 inhibitors. Unfortunately, they're actually inhibitors of COX-1 and COX-2. So yes, there is something known as COX-1. COX-1 is involved in tissue maintenance and repair and rebuilding, basically. And it's because of this suppression of COX-1 that these medications are associated with side effects like kidney issues or gastrointestinal bleeding, etc., respectively amongst them. So the point being is that while suppressing COX-2 is great for helping pain, suppressing COX-1 is not so beneficial. So what we want to do is we want to consider ways to improve or raise COX-1. And the thing to know there is that is basically related to the fats that a person consumes. COX-2 is created in the body from arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is a fat found in non-grass-fed beef and is something that is made from omega-6 fatty acids that we consume in things such as vegetable oil, canola oil, and other fatty foods that are high in omega-6, low in omega-3. So the issue there is that COX-1 becomes suppressed, and it's its job to support your body's ability to heal and repair. So the issue here is if we've been using these medications for something like many years, then the likely scenario biologically is that we would be suppressing COX-1 as well as COX-2, the one that would relieve us of pain. And so if we are suppressing COX-1, then we're not probably rebuilding cartilage and tissue. So of course, it seems logical that we might hurt more because we have been suppressing our ability to regenerate and promote and support healing of the tissue. So the idea there is that if we do use fewer NSAIDs, we will be suppressing COX-1 less. And if we increase our dietary intake of omega-3 fatty acids through something like flax oil or fish oil, then we'll be supporting our ability to manufacture COX-1 and promote tissue supporting regeneration, if that sentence makes any sense. So kind of a long video today, but this is actually a very complicated issue, and I wanted to give everybody that idea about the relationship between NSAIDs and omega-3 and 6 fats in regards to these two inflammatory enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2. COX-1 being supportive of tissue, COX-2 being the one that is inflammation or represents inflammation, and a little bit of that is good, but too much of it creates pain, and that's where things that suppress COX-2 help with pain. So, what if there were other substances that did not suppress COX-1 like NSAIDs are known to do, but still suppress COX-2, at least to a degree? And there is a lot of scientific evidence that various herbs do that. There are books like Beyond Aspirin here by Tom Newmark and Paul Schulich that go into detail on herbs that have been specifically studied for their ability to suppress COX-2, that have been demonstrated to suppress COX-2 in research, while suppressing COX-1 very little, if at all, as well as herbs that are commonly grown, that are available, that are not known to have other dramatic negative side effects, etc. So I would encourage somebody that was in this type of situation to look into herbs that suppress COX-2 but don't suppress COX-1. Finally, there is a subcategory of herbs that are thought to be supportive of what we would call neurological health, that someone who suffered from headaches might consider looking into some of these herbs. Most famous amongst them, and the one that in my experience seems to have the best scientific track record, is feverfew. So I would encourage you to look into feverfew. I would encourage you to look into and consider whether somebody in this scenario might consider whether they could use the support of B vitamins. B vitamins play a big role in things like blood sugar balance. So we want to promote a situation where we're not dealing with something like hypoglycemia or low blood sugar episodes. And certain B vitamins, such as vitamin B2, have been the subject of studies with migraine, and so you could consider looking into whether that might be a factor. Finally, diet issues. Some people have issues with nightshades. Those are going to be plants that grow at night in the shade. That'd be peppers, tomatoes, eggplants. They have a compound in them that, I'm going to mess up the name a little bit, but I believe it's called scopolamine, and this is toxic to everyone, but different people have different sensitivities to it, and when you see a brown spot on a potato, for example, that's supposed to be a concentration of this compound. Anyways, that can be a hidden cause of pain in some people that they don't even know about. Some folks eat nightshades every single day, also have a lot of pain. Some of those folks might benefit from a reduction in nightshades. Finally, there are certain foods that ferment in our guts, especially depending on whether or not we have overgrowth of certain bacteria or fungi in our gut. And so there are diets that follow low food maps or FODMAPs. Those are fermentable oligo, di, and monosaccharides and polyols is what that stands for. So these are fermentable carbohydrates that some people have issues with. So you can get into diet roads like that, but those are things to look into. Finally, also I want to comment, caffeine fluctuations. What if somebody consumes caffeine 2 out of 3 days and doesn't on the third day, but doesn't make the connection that perhaps they are dealing with caffeine withdrawal? So I would also ask somebody in this scenario, is their caffeine intake consistent, or is there a hidden cause of sometimes occasional headaches associated with caffeine withdrawal? So finally, just to summarize some of the considerations and things that I would consider for folks that are dealing with this kind of scenario. Are they getting sufficient omega-3 in order to produce enough COX-1 to promote tissue supporting, not supporting, but tissue support and repair? Are the NSAIDs that they've been using, have they been suppressing COX-1 for so long that they have missed out on some tissue support and repair that might be contributing to their pain? I would consider reducing COX-2 naturally using herbs, and that's something that you can speak to your physician about. It's definitely something that you want to make sure that is appropriate for you. Consider herbs such as feverfew. I would do some research on the internet if you're dealing with a lot of headaches. And you mentioned that you already use magnesium, which is why we're not mentioning that. But magnesium is a great thing to consider for folks that deal with tightness or headaches, etc. We want to consider the diet, nightshades, whether or not things like fermentable carbohydrates or sugars are causing issues with your microbiome that might be somehow creating pain or inflammation through that mechanism. And then finally, I would even encourage you, like we said earlier, to consider whether or not you're getting sufficient B vitamins in your diet. Some of these things you mentioned can be associated with some of the deficiency symptoms of certain B vitamins. And so that's just something I'm also wondering about. So, Tara, I hope that gives you some general info on your question. And I am sorry for the long video, everybody, but this is a topic that really required sufficient thought. But again, anybody considering any of this, go talk to your doctor, your healthcare provider. This is not specific advice for anybody. These are things that I think somebody with these general kinds of issues might want to consider. Simply that.